Now that it is understood what is the function of thyroid, what is the physiology and the functions associated with thyroid gland, let us come to parathyroid glands. As the name suggests, it is a great deal to do with thyroid because it is parathyroid, and you have seen in the diagram that we saw the video in the previous lecture that the parathyroid was situated at the back side of the thyroid gland. So we had seen that thyroid gland was like this near trachea, and if this is thyroid gland, there were two pairs of parathyroid glands which were present like this. So this is the parathyroid gland, which is very important, which is present along with thyroid, which is very important for regulating the calcium ion content of blood. Okay. Now this is a very small endocrine gland that is present, but it has a very important role because you know calcium ions are very important for the ionic balance that is required for the transport and other membrane potentials. Calcium plays a very important role. Apart from that, calcium is very much required when we talk about muscle contraction. We are going to understand about that what muscle contraction, what is the role of calcium ions in muscle contraction. It is the stimulus basically. So the calcium content of the blood would be regulated by parathyroid hormone, which is known as parathormone, or otherwise we call it PTH. Okay, this PTH, you have to remember, is a peptide hormone secreted in small quantities into the blood, and in blood what they do is once it understands the calcium content of the blood, that the level of the calcium which is present in the blood along with thyroid gland and the hormones of thyroid, that is calcitonin, it plays an important role in regulating the calcium blood mechanism. Now this parathormone, what it does is, you know that what is the reservoir of calcium in our body? That happens to be bone. So this parathormone, when it is released into the blood, it makes the resorption of bones stimulated. It is stimulated, basically the bone resorption is stimulated, which enables more calcium ions to come into the blood, and it regulates the blood calcium levels. This parathormone would go and allow the bone resorption to increase so that the calcium level in the blood increases, and calcium plays whatever vital activities it has to play in other physiological functions, and it also stimulates the resorption of calcium by renal tubules. You know that in our kidney most of the content of the blood is thrown out and then it is reabsorbed in PCT and DCT, proximal convoluted tubule and distal convoluted tubule. Those tubules are responsible for resorption from the blood, the filtrate that goes into the kidney. So this parathormone, if it is released in higher quantities, it also enables the reabsorption of calcium ions which had gone into the filtrate from the glomerulus into the kidney, so that the calcium comes back into the blood. Alright. Now whenever we study the glands, we also take into consideration what if this gland is doing hyposecretion and what would be the condition in hypersecretion. Before coming to hyposecretion and hypersecretion, we also need to see that this particular hormone is responsible for reducing the reabsorption of phosphate ions so that calcium ions can be taken up back more. Okay, if there is any relation, you are asked about that, what is the relation of parathormone and phosphate? Phosphate in the renal tubules would be absorbed less if the parathormone is higher in quantities. So coming back to the hyposecretion and hypersecretion thing, first of all let us see what if there is hyposecretion of the parathormone in the human body. If there is lesser secretion of this peptide hormone, what would happen? The calcium level that was regulated in the blood, that would come down. And when the calcium level comes down, it is believed that it is vitamin D deficiency. So we give the patient or the person suffering from the hyposecretion of parathormone more of vitamin D, so that the calcium content which has come down in the blood, that can be retaken back. Then in the case of hypersecretion, there would be a condition where the bones would lose more of the calcium, and if they are losing more calcium, they would become brittle. So there is a condition more of calcium, and hypersecretion would lead to hypercalcemia in blood. That means more of the calcium ions, which are much more than the required quantity in the blood, would be present. The calcium would be more in the blood. That would be due to hypersecretion of parathormone, and in case of hyposecretion of parathormone, the blood will have lesser content of calcium, and as the lesser content of calcium is very much associated with muscular functions, there would be tetany and muscular pains and bone pains which would be seen in the case of any abnormality in the parathormone secretion. So this is all we have to deal with parathyroid glands, which are present near at the back side of thyroid gland. They are very important along with calcitonin, which is a thyroid hormone. They regulate the blood calcium levels in the human body. And one more thing you have to remember, that supposedly you might have heard that many people get their thyroid glands removed in case it is problematic. So that in that case, if the thyroid gland is removed, parathyroid is also removed, and the person has to make sure that these hormones or these derivatives are taken in the form of medicines so that the calcium level inside the blood is maintained.